Some interesting discussion popped up today in the official Godforge channel. Kind of like a rift just appearing out of the middle of nowhere. So, let's discuss this. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Hollywood here with another Godforge video. I hope you're doing well and having a great week so far. Before I get to the actual topic today of the video, I just want to say that this video going on in the background behind me here is footage from Alpha 3. So this isn't current Godforge content, just so you're aware that this isn't current game footage and the game currently looks different now. So I just wanted everyone to be aware of that before I get into the actual video content. So earlier today, on the official Godforge channel, they released a video discussing the new rift system mechanic. So what is a rift in the game of Godforge? Simon said rifts are a place, a random area that pops up kind of in the middle of nowhere that offers you an additional system to acquire materials to improve your heroes. So let's say when you're doing a dungeon like this one, or a dungeon similar to this one in the game of Godforge, a rift pops up in the middle of nowhere and gives you the option to fight another boss now, or get a key, a rift key to save and use for a later opportunity to fight a rift boss for additional resources to upgrade your heroes. So this new rift system or rift mechanic is going to be one way in Godforge to get additional resources, let's say god steel or extra gear or extra weapons, perhaps extra ascension material or skill tomes and skill tome pages. So Simon mentioned that one of the primary ways that you're going to be receiving things like skill tomes and pages to go on those tomes for rare, epic, and legendary skill tomes and books is going to be by doing these systems in the game called rifts. So one of the first topics of discussion regarding the rift system was risk versus reward. There was this idea that when a rift boss pops up, they are going to give you a rift key, and you're going to be having the option to use that rift key instantly or save that rift key for another date at a later time. So you can save up a bunch of these rift keys if you want and use them later when you maybe feel more comfortable with a rift type boss. Now there's a couple of different ideas and a couple of different thought processes regarding whether you want to use rift keys instantly or if you want to save them for another date, and there's some positives and negatives to both. And some of that's regarding risk versus reward. So one of the ideas brought up was the Odd One method by Odd One Gaming. Odd One was talking about it being a bonus to use your rift key instantly, and perhaps you would get double the rewards or better the rewards. Maybe you would, if it was God Steel that drops in the reward, maybe you would get double the God Steel. Or if it was gear that dropped in the reward, maybe you would get a higher rarity gear. Or more gear, maybe it would be 2 pieces instead of 1. Or maybe if it was skill tome pages, maybe you would get more pages, or you would get a full skill tome book as opposed to 1 or 2 pages. The reward here, and the reward for doing them instantly, is you get more or better rewards. The risk is that you lose your key and you don't get any rewards. So I think the fact that you would lose a key in that fight is risk enough. Sham mentioned at one point he had 68 rift keys sitting around. So one of the things I think would be a risk not using those is that if they offer skill tomes or skill pages, that's potentially 68 tomes or 68 pages that you're sitting on, not using those rift keys instantly. And let's say if you do use them instantly and your reward is better for using them instantly, and you got 68 rift keys kicking around, maybe that could be 68 tomes or 68 books that you can get instead of holding on to those, or maybe getting nothing if you lose. So the reward there is by getting better resources. The risk is by one, not doing it instantly, because if you don't do that rift key instantly, you're getting lower or less rewards. And if you lose against the boss, you're losing your reward completely. So I feel that that choice the player makes of whether they want to go for that boss to get those rewards or losing those rewards entirely if they don't get a victory against that boss, I think for me, that's high enough risk and reward to begin with, because you would be losing your reward. So that's one resource you would be losing if you lost against a boss. So if you didn't feel comfortable playing against that boss, that could be a skill tome that you're losing, or it could be some extra gear that you're losing, or it could be an imprint that you're losing, or some god steel that you're losing. So for me, that's an inherent risk that's good enough. Basically, that risk is a double or nothing risk. So if you do that key instantly, you get double the rewards. If you take that risk and you lose the key, then you get nothing. So there's your risk. I think that's all the risk you need to do this. And I think that gives the player a good option. And I also feel that you should not lose energy in this as well, because if this is a bonus Rift boss, then it should be a bonus and you shouldn't lose energy on your bonus, right? Now, one of the other questions was, what kind of boss should this Rift boss be? Should this be one consistent Rift boss that appears every time the Rift opens? And maybe these bosses will be rotated periodically over a few weeks or a few months. So there was some discussion whether there should be one Rift boss, and then maybe a month later or a few weeks later that Rift boss rotates. And then there's another Rift boss, so that when every time the Rift opens, you know exactly which boss you're going to be facing. Simon mentioned currently that the Rift boss you're facing is Ra. So then you would know Ra's abilities and you would be able to build a team that can face that Rift boss. Now, my opinion here on this, and it's going to be way out in left field here, and it's probably going to be a little bit controversial, but my take on this is that I feel that any boss that is available in the game, especially for legendary Rift keys, is every boss on the roster should be available to pop in the Rift when the Rift pops up. And I think the randomness of the Rift popping up and the randomness of the boss makes that extra cool. So here's two methods of thought regarding what the Rift boss should be and how often that Rift boss should change. So if you have a consistent Rift boss that appears for a certain duration, maybe a 1 week at a time or 1 month at a time, or maybe that boss rotates in 3 months, the plus for that, you would be able to build a team that you know can beat that boss. So here is the negative of having that boss be consistent over a week or a month or a few months. So if I was to use an example like the Doom Tower in Raid, there were definitely some bosses in that Doom Tower that I would just roadblocked against. That I hit a brick wall and I couldn't beat that boss, right? So let's say your Rift boss is one of those kind of bosses. If a player is playing against a boss for a month that they can't beat, that's going to get super frustrating super fast. And they're not going to want to beat their head against a wall for a month trying to beat a boss that they can't beat. So if that was a case, those players might be holding on to those Rift keys until that Rift boss changes into a boss that they know they can beat. So that would be, I think, a non-optimal way to do that, because then that player is holding on to those Rift keys and they're not going against that Rift boss because they feel that they can't beat that Rift boss. That will make that player pretty discouraged, knowing that they can't get those skill tomes or those skill pages or those extra bonus materials because they know that they can't beat that boss. If that boss rotates quicker, at a quicker pace, or if that boss is random, then that gives the player a better chance of success if they know they can beat different kinds of bosses, right? Like let's say a boss pops up that I know I have a team for, then I know that I can beat that boss. If a boss pops up that I don't have a team for, then maybe I can save that Rift key for a later date when a different boss pops up that I know I can beat, right? I know for me, if I got a Rift key and a boss popped up that I knew that I couldn't beat, I think I'd get pretty frustrated having that same boss pop up for a month or longer. Let's say that boss popped up as your Rift boss for 3 months straight. Then as a player, I know that every time a Rift pops up that I'm not going to beat that boss and I'm not going to have a chance. Maybe I don't have a hero that is good against that boss, or I don't have a certain team composition that I know that can beat that boss. But if the bosses are more random and they're popping up different times, maybe I know that I can build a team that can take on a different boss and win, and I know that I can get those rewards. The other thing there is that Simon mentioned also that there's going to be different levels of bosses. So maybe you're going to have like bosses for rare materials and bosses for epic materials and bosses for legendary materials. And maybe the kinds of bosses you're going to get at those various different levels are going to be different. So maybe the rare bosses will be easier. The epic bosses that drop epic materials will be sort of a moderate level of difficulty. And then your legendary level rift bosses are going to be, maybe they're going to be a bigger pool of bosses to pick from. They could be more random. Maybe you don't know which boss you're going to face. So to summarize my discussion on the rift boss mechanics, here are my ideas for what the rift bosses could be. For one, I do like the odd one gaming method where there's more risk and more reward in doing the boss key instantly, so that you can double your rewards or get better rarity rewards or get more rewards if you do that key instantly as opposed to saving that key. So I think that gives a good risk to reward option there for the player. I think that makes it fun. I also think there should be more than one boss that can appear at any given time. I don't think that boss should be consistent for a month or more at a time. I think that would get pretty frustrating for the player. I think that would also get pretty boring for the player too if you have to face the same boss all the time when a rift pops up. I personally think it would be more fun, more challenging, and more potential for success if we had a pool of bosses that could spawn in a rift and that was random, and you could get any one of a number of bosses, maybe 3 bosses or 5 bosses or 10 bosses. Using an example like with Raid and their Doom Tower, I think if you had a rift popped up and any one of those bosses from the Doom Tower could be your rift boss, I think that would be a fun mechanic. And if I knew that I could beat a spider boss, but I know that I can't beat a Scarab King boss or a Bommel boss, that might add to my decision on whether I want to use that key instantly or hang on to that key for a later date. And there is your risk and reward too. So if you use that key instantly, you get better rewards. If you save that key for a later date, you don't get as good rewards, but maybe you might be able to save it for a boss that you feel more comfortable beating later. I also feel like a lot of the community that I've seen in Discord so far thinks that there should be a limit on the amount of keys that you can have at one point. I think that makes your risk versus reward choice a bit better, and you know that you're not able to get more keys after already having a certain number of keys makes the player know that they have to use those keys before they're able to get other resources. Now, each one of those keys is going to be a potential resource. It could be a potential skill tome, it could be a potential skill tome page or pages, it could be potential gear or weapons or imprints. So you're already going to be motivated as a player to want to use those keys because you're going to want to get those resources to make your character better. So if I get keys, I'm going to want to use them because that could be a skill tome that I might get, or some gear, or some weapons, or an imprint, or a god steel, or some other thing that I can get. So my incentive is that I want to use those keys pretty quick because I want to use those potential resources, or I want to get those potential resources. And if I use those keys instantly, my odds of getting better rewards or more rewards is better. So that's my incentive for taking that risk for the reward. But all in all, I have to say that was a very cool video for the Godforge team to release. I think the discussion was very cool, and to all those that were in that video today, I think you did a fantastic job with that. A lot of cool and interesting ideas were proposed for that Rift system. I even think adding the odd one method to the game would be a cool nod to odd one gaming. This is your game. You can do what you want with this game. If you want to call it the odd one method and put that in the game, that's a cool thing to do. And I think odd one would like you to do that. So I think that's pretty cool. So thank you everyone for stopping by today's video. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you've gotten anything from this video today. Feel free to leave some comments in the comments section below if you have any interesting and additional ideas for the Rift system. I'm sure the Godforge devs would love to hear from you regarding this system. Don't forget also to sign up for the beta happening next month on May 19th if you haven't signed up already. I really enjoy making these videos for you, and it's something I really want to do more of over the course of this year and have this channel grow so that I can be a regular content creator for you in Godforge here. It's a wonderful community, and I'm very excited to see what the future of this game is going to look like here in the next year and upcoming years. Wishing everyone a happy day and a wonderful upcoming weekend. Take care, everyone.